Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into a real mystery, a true crime case that has haunted a small Australian town for over 20 years. We're talking about Maria Yan, a beloved grandmother brutally murdered in her own home. And what's really interesting is we've got a true crime podcast episode as our source material. It's like we get to be detectives, looking over their shoulders, piecing together the puzzle alongside them.
Yeah, it's full of twists and turns, this one. Different stories. And, that big question hanging over it all, was Maria's murder, was it a crime of passion, or something more planned out?
Okay, so before we get into all the details, let's introduce Maria Yan to our listener. I mean, who was she? What made her so special to her community?
Well, Maria was 69 years old,
Yeah.
a grandmother, living in Hillsville, Australia. And she was, really involved in her community, devoted to her family, volunteered at the local opportunity shop. They called her one of the good ones, always willing to help out people in need.
Sounds like she was really, really loved. The heart of Hillsville. And then, tragically, she's found murdered in her own home. Can you tell us about the crime scene? What did they find?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. It's disturbing, the crime scene. Brutal. Doesn't match how neat and tidy her house was. Picture this. A brutal attack. 22 blows to the head, but her house is spotless. No sign of a fight, no forced entry. It just doesn't add up.
Right. That's really strange. Almost like whoever did it was trying to, I don't know, send a message or hide something. What did the investigators think about that?
At first, they saw no forced entry, and a credit card was missing, so they thought robbery, right? But then the house was too tidy, and nothing else was taken. Plus, here's a weird detail. They found Maria in a chair she usually kept for guests. So maybe she knew her attacker. Maybe she let them in.
Wow, okay. That changes things a lot. It's not just random violence, it's something personal, maybe even targeted. So who did the investigators start looking at?
Well, first they looked at the family, of course. Her son, Jeff. He knew her routines. They were close.
That makes sense. But did they have anything solid linking him to it?
Not really. He had a good alibi. And every time he was super protective of his mother. In fact, he told police Maria was really careful about letting people in, especially at night.
Okay, so not a family member then. So who did they turn their attention to?
Well, this is where the story takes a turn. The podcast introduces James Anamadu, Maria's son-in-law. He was married to her daughter, Pauline, and their relationship. Let's just say it was rocky. Lots of fights, separations, even intervention orders against James.
Wow, so a lot of tension there. Where did Maria fit into all of that?
She was stuck in the middle, really,
Yeah.
supporting her daughter, but also trying to navigate this difficult relationship with James. At first, she tried to, keep the peace. But as things got worse, she told Pauline to leave him, which, well, it just made things more tense.
Sounds like Maria was in a tough spot, protecting her daughter, dealing with potentially a dangerous person. Did this affect the investigation at all?
Oh, yeah. Remember that 5-hour gap and James's alibi we talked about? Well, it lines up with when they think Maria died.
Yeah.
And considering their relationship. And Maria's supporting Pauline leaving him. Well, the investigators started focusing on James a lot more.
That's a huge detail. But before we jump ahead, you mentioned a missing credit card. Did that lead anywhere?
Turns out that was a bit of a dead end. They found it later, near Maria's house. Looks like it was dropped, not stolen. But it did. Kind of distract the investigators at first. Kept them from focusing on James.
So a false lead early on. But with the timeline matching up with James and all that tension, and Maria being so cautious normally, things are really pointing at him, huh?
You bet. Remember, just because it looks suspicious doesn't make him guilty. To build a strong case, they needed more. More than just circumstances. They needed to understand James, his actions, his reasons. And that's where things get even more complicated.
So we've got James right in the spotlight now. But what actual evidence did the investigators have to link him to the murder?
Well, that's the thing about this case. It's what makes it so intriguing, I guess. There was no smoking gun, as they say, no DNA, no fingerprints, no weapon. They had to build their case on motive and opportunity.
So basically, they had to convince the jury that James had a reason to kill Maria and that he could have actually done it.
Yeah.
So what was their argument?
Basically, they said that James was under a lot of pressure, divorce, money problems, Maria pushing Pauline to leave him. They made him look like a desperate man, full of resentment, seeing Maria as, in the way of getting back with his wife.
Yeah, it makes sense given what we know about their relationship. But couldn't the defense just say, hey, that's just speculation. You don't have any proof?
Oh, they did. They kept saying, where's the evidence? No physical evidence, at the crime scene, connecting James to it. It was all circumstantial.
Like a puzzle, with some pieces missing. So what else did the prosecution have?
They had a witness, Andrea King. She said she and James had a thing, while he and Pauline were separated. At first, she denied knowing him, but then she changed her story, said she overheard James talking on the phone about the murder, even a confession.
A confession, that's huge. But if she lied at first, why would the jury believe her?
Well, that's what the defense went after. They said she was in it for the reward money, trying to get a payout.
So it's a he said, she said kind of thing. Did the prosecution have anything else to back her up?
They tried. They wanted to tell the jury about other incidents with James to show that he was unstable,
Yeah.
dangerous maybe. There was a break-in at Pauline's place, a fight over the ashes of their stillborn child. This is a weird one. There was something about a witch doctor.
Wait, a witch doctor? That's a bit out of left field. What was that about?
It's one of the stranger parts of this whole thing. Maria, she filed a statement about James trying to, hurt himself, and this phone call from a witch doctor called Baba.
Witchcraft. Threats, maybe? That sounds like important evidence. It shows he was on edge, capable of violence. Did the jury ever hear about this?
Here's the thing. It got complicated. The judge said no. Too prejudicial. Ruled it inadmissible.
What? Why? If it showed he was making threats, acting erratically, why couldn't the jury hear?
Well, it's the rules of the court, right? Hearsay, secondhand information, often not allowed. Because the person who said it originally can't be questioned. In this case, Maria. She was gone. Couldn't testify.
Even though it could have helped. Explain James's state of mind. It was thrown out. That must have hurt the prosecution's case.
Definitely. Without that extra information, they had to rely on circumstantial evidence, the timeline, and Andrea King, who, let's face it, wasn't the most reliable witness. It gave the defense a lot to work with, a lot of reasonable doubt.
Right. So we've got the prosecution trying to make their case, but with one hand tied behind their back, and the defense poking holes in everything. This is getting tense. What did the jury decide?
After 2 weeks of evidence and 5 hours deliberating, they found James not guilty.
Wow. I bet that was just crushing for Maria's family. So many unanswered questions. I can only imagine what Maria's family went through after that verdict. Relief that it was over, but also so much disappointment, anger, no real closure.
Did they ever find peace, or did they keep
Maybe-
searching for justice?
It's interesting, the family didn't all react the same way. The podcast talks about the difference between Maria's children, Pauline and Jeff. Pauline, she was married to James, right?
Yeah.
She always believed he was innocent, and still does.
No, to stand by him through all that must take a lot of faith.
Yeah, it does. But then Jeff, Maria's son, he was sure James was guilty from the start, and he was angry at the system for letting him go.
Like, the trauma ripples out, tears a family apart. Did it make things worse between them?
It sounds like it. From the podcast, the trial, and everything after, it definitely made things harder. Imagine that, losing your mom, and then your brother or sister believes the person who did it is innocent. Just heartbreaking. Yeah, it's a reminder that these cases, they're not just stories. They're real people's lives. And the effects, they last.
Exactly. Maria, she wasn't just a victim. She was a mother, grandmother, a friend, important to the whole community. They all felt it when she was gone.
You mentioned she was known for her kindness, helping others. What was it like for Hillsville when she died?
It really shook them. This peaceful town suddenly wasn't so safe anymore. People were scared, looking over their shoulders. And the case being unsolved didn't help. It left everyone feeling vulnerable, uncertain.
A kind of shared trauma that
Yep.
stayed with them. But was there any, I don't know, any hope, any progress towards answers for Maria's family and for the town?
Actually, yeah, the case got some new attention. In 2021, thanks to Detective Tim Day, he was one of the original investigators, and he came out and said he thinks it can be solved.
That's good. Did that lead to anything?
They brought in a new detective to take another look at the evidence,
Yeah.
old leads, even people they had ruled out before, and they put up a big reward, $1 million for information.
$1 million? Wow. Someone must know something. Did anyone come forward?
Not yet. As of late 2023, no new arrests, no charges, but the case is still open, and that reward, it's still out
There's still hope. That maybe justice for Maria is still possible. What about James? What's he been up to? Does he still say he's innocent?
Oh, yeah. He's always denied it. Said he was persecuted for something he didn't do.
Hard to believe that with everything we've learned, the timeline, the tension, all the suspicions. Like, we'll never really know the whole truth.
That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? It's not just about the facts. It's about people, the choices they make, how the system works, and the search for truth that never really ends.
It makes you think about the evidence, the different sides of the story, what really happened that night in Hillsville.
Maria's story, it reminds us that justice, it doesn't have a time limit. Her family, they haven't given up. And that should inspire us to keep asking questions, to have hope, and never stop looking for the truth, no matter how hard it is.
That's a really powerful thought and a good place to end our deep dive into the Maria Yan case. We've covered a lot. The twists and turns, the different perspectives, the unanswered questions that still hang over this town. But we've also seen how much these events affect people, the power of love and loss, and that fight for justice that goes on and on.
If you want to learn more, there's a Maria Yan Facebook group, the Victorian Police Case Hub, and of course, the podcast episode we used as our source.
Check those out. Think about the details, the different viewpoints. Maybe you'll see something new, a piece of the puzzle. Or maybe you'll just feel that hope, that justice for Maria, even if it takes time, is still out there. Until next time, keep those minds curious. And remember, even in the darkest times, the truth always has a way of finding its way out.